From the John DeVito Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Armchair Experts with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich on Wednesday, August the 5th, the year of our Lord, 2015. And now, here they are. Oh, yes, ready and raring and tearing to go. Jim and Rich.
Hey.
Yeah, we have no idea what we're going to talk about. So.
In the words of ravishing Rick Rude,
Stop the music!
Hey. And speaking of ravishing Rick Rude, who's been deceased for a number of years, Roddy Piper.
Not a number of years. Oh, yes, Roddy.
This week.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rick Rude has been he's been deceased for quite a few years.
Okay. All right.
So.
Yeah, that one was a shock.
Roddy?
Yeah.
But, I mean,
he's
think of Roddy Piper's personality. If his real personality, yes, he was. If his real personality was anything like his ring persona, he probably was a candidate for a stroke or a heart attack, regardless. So,
I wonder how, with everything that's gone on lately, with Hulk getting fired by the WWE and
we have
Dusty Rhodes passing away, and
we have a very squeamish society, don't we, Jim?
We do.
I mean, I'm telling you. When we had our show prep yesterday,
what we laughingly refer to as show prep. I have no memory of what we talked about.
I wanted to go back to if you look at the other paper about the column from the USA Today writer. I think it's Bell. Is it Bell? Garrett Bell, maybe, about the Deflategate. And I learned something that here you get the gist of what's happening with the Tom Brady thing, and thinking that he is basically been caught with the so-called smoking gun. But even in Ted Wells' report, it says it's more probable than not that he knew about it, not that he instructed anybody to do it or anything. So I'm thinking, how the heck do you get 4 games based on that? No wonder he's suing the NFL.
Yeah, and you have Le'Veon Bell, who gets his DUI suspension dropped from 4 to 2.
Right.
You've had the whole issue with last year with Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson, and I don't know.
I'll say again, Jim, I understand, because you've reminded me a number of times that this contractually the NFL is able to, because and the NFL and NFLPA obviously have agreed on this, that there are conduct clauses in the contracts.
Right.
If I would, I don't know how the NFLPA agreed to that or what the impetus for that was. But I have to say, I
think the impetus was that it's a $40 billion industry.
Well, I mean, I have a basic objection to, now, okay, you brought up, now Brady's thing is strictly an NFL issue.
Right.
It's not a criminal thing or anything.
No, it's not a criminal thing.
Although
they could say code of conduct, too.
There's where they have some authority in my mind. But when you get even a guy like, you just referred to Le'Veon Bell. Okay, he's, he had a DUI or something?
I believe so.
Okay, so that's a court issue. Why does the NFL get to jump on with 2 games? I mean, I say this, if the Pittsburgh Steelers decide that their employee, if he's been a bad boy in the past and they want to lay him off for 2 games, I'm up for that. But the NFL, the umbrella organization, how do they jump into this thing? This is what ticks me off.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, when you go back to the Ray Rice, incident initially, Baltimore decided prior, I think even prior to the NFL issue, that this is a guy we don't want associated with our organization.
Yeah, I think
that became a corporate choice.
And I think the interesting thing about the Ray Rice thing is Ray Rice. Now, put it this way: Adrian Peterson is reemployed by the Vikings. Brady will be back with the Patriots, obviously. Le'Veon Bell will be back with Pittsburgh, but nobody's picked up Ray Rice. So I'm thinking that Ray Rice may have been a borderline type of guy. I know he was the main guy for the Ravens, but the way
Ray Rice's skills were quite sharply on the decline.
Okay, so that's why Ray Rice hasn't been signed.
Why.
But if he was still useful for a football team, he would have been signed regardless.
Somebody would have picked him up right away.
So
how about the guy that what they have him clocked? They've had him on the guy who played for the Jets. Had him clocked at 120 miles an hour.
Geez, I don't know.
I can't think of his name now. Had him clocked at 120 miles an hour. He had a 12-year-old kid in the car, and I think he was drunk too.
I have to say, just because they're in the spotlight, these are still young men that with a lot of money and from various types of backgrounds, and I think you can expect a certain amount of that type of behavior. One of the things that really aggravates me is when I hear the talking schmoes in the media say, well, you know what, spousal abuse is an NFL problem. Now, that's where I'll jump on the side of the NFL and say, well, how is it an NFL I mean, you know what? There's lawyers who abuse their wives. There's doctors who abuse their wives. All kinds of professions. So is it an AMA problem?
Right? Is it an American Bar Association?
Yeah,
problem?
Exactly. I mean, these. I'll tell you. That's why I say our society is really stupid. I mean, we're in deep doo-doo here.
Getting dumber.
And you know what? I have to say, I know that we're on a Ridgewood station. And I was a member of the Ridgewood School Board, but one of the things that, one of our primary things in our mission statement is, to develop lifelong learners and individual thinkers. And I think what we're doing is anything, now I'm not saying Ridgewood, I'm saying we in a general sense, our society is doing anything but
there is no desire to be original thinkers.
No, not at all.
March with the program.
Exactly. So,
and that's exactly what the government would like.
They definitely would like that. No doubt about it.
The worst enemy of the government is a well-informed populace.
Exactly. And you know what? When you and I don't want to get into a political thing, but when you talk about issues like gun rights and property rights and things like this, people have no clue. I mean, free speech is going right down the tube.
That's right.
That's the way I see it, anyway.
That's right.
So,
no,
and you know what? I don't have to. When I say free speech,
you're very right about that.
I don't have to like what you say, but you still have the right to say it. As long as you're not endangering somebody by saying it, you have the right to say it. So, whether it's something that I agree with and somebody else disagrees with, or vice versa, you do have the right to speak your mind and see things the way you want to see them. Mm-hmm. And yet, people who, let's not get off the beaten path here or the accepted ways of speaking. We can't have that now. We can't have you actually having your own thoughts, and whether those thoughts are right or wrong is irrelevant. That's the way you feel, that's the way you think, and you have the right to speak those thoughts.
Which is interesting when you think about what's going on right now with the presidential election coming up next year, and there's the fact that there's 912 candidates on that are running as a Republican right now, and with all that's coming out of Donald Trump's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
He's resonating with people.
Well, I think one of the reasons he's resonating is that people understand that let's put it this way, the people that I would consider in the Beltway, and I would include like the governor of Texas and the governor of Louisiana those people are all going by what I would call proscribed, proscribed speech.
Right.
In other words, they have speech limitations
Right.
that they impose on themselves. Donald Trump, I think, is resonating because the public basically knows, at least the voting public, basically knows that most politicians are not saying what they really think. And this guy is saying, or it seems to be saying what he thinks. And whether that's what he thinks or not, that's, I think, part of what's resonating with the public.
It is, and I have a friend of mine who is a diehard conservative.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mike would make Attila the Hun look liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Who just he can't stand Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Because he said if you go back and look at a lot of the stuff, he's just a liberal in disguise.
Well, there's that's what they're saying, and I guess the record speaks for itself. But he's smart enough to know, obviously, what will resonate with a certain group of people. I would say this: even if I didn't agree with what he said, and I don't necessarily, I think some of what he said was sort of said backwards. He should have said most people who come here from Mexico obviously are law-abiding in the sense they don't break our laws, other than the one that they broke just by coming here.
Right.
But, there are murderers and rapists and whatnot that are coming across the border. I think the problem he had is he mentioned the murderers and rapists first, and then said, oh, yeah, no, of course we also have good people coming here. So people jumped all over that. Regardless of the way he spoke it, that if that's his thoughts or that's what he chose to say, he's got the right to say it. And, I think, hey, if you don't like it, then you don't have to vote for him. You don't have to support him. But, what I don't understand is why does everybody get all upset? If you don't like it, and if the majority of people don't like it, then he's not a factor anyway.
No, I think so. But I think the concern is that there are some people that are running that their message is going to get lost on the Republican ballot. People like Marco Rubio.
Well, you know what? I like a guy like Marco Rubio, but I'll say this. He falls in the same category, I believe, as everybody except Trump. He's going to say something within certain bounds. He's not going to go outside those bounds.
Right. He's going to do that. And, well, we'll see what happens.
Interesting thing is, let's get off politics, but I think the way I look at it, there are still a lot of Hispanic people who will support Donald Trump because I think there's very much a feeling that your mainstream media won't talk about that, we are here, we did it the right way, and I don't care if I'm Hispanic and the other person's Hispanic. Hey, I'm not for the guy who jumped the line when I had to do it the right way. And I think if any candidate comes out and says something in that way, that's going to resonate with people regardless of, what their ethnicity is. So, because I think people understand, hey, why does this guy get to jump to the front of the line when I had to jump through all the hoops?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, let's...
Wow, first time we ever talked politics.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Wow.
And, the other day, there was a gentleman in Fannie and Schmoes that was asking what type of show we had, and he said, "You do politics and sports?" I said, "We don't do politics. We do sports." And here we are, 2 days or a day later, talking a little bit of politics. But let's get off of that because it's an aggravating subject anyway. So,
what'd you think of everything that happened at the trade deadline?
You know what? I think that. I thought about this the other day after we had our conversation and we ran a little bit of this by each other. I think the trade deadline is exciting for fans. It's exciting for me as a fan every year just to see who's going to move. But I think it's a little overrated. And I think that, say, moves like the Cubs made, which are, maybe considered on the grander scale minor ones, they're like a 5 instead of a 10.
And they
are
didn't-
just as
and
likely to be productive as
Yeah.
the big the big splashes
the
are.
big splashes are. And I mean the issue with the Cubs is they solved they got a couple of needs and it didn't cost them anything.
That's huge right there too. I mean, when you look
Junior
at
Lake was never going to amount to anything.
well, no, I mean he really fell down the pecking order with a lot of good young prospects
Right.
coming into the system. I was going to say, how do you think a team? Now it's a crapshoot. How do you think a team like L.A., who probably added half a dozen new faces, and obviously you got to shovel half a dozen people off to other locations. You're already sitting in first place. Does that help you that you have to incorporate now maybe 5 or 6 new people into
Who
what
knows?
you're already doing, or does that hurt you really?
Who knows?
That's actually sort of a big gamble when you think about it.
And a lot of people have said all the deals that Philadelphia made has strengthened them, especially in their minor league, which was kind of weak.
Oh, that's
So you know what? Maybe in a couple of years we're going to be talking about how good the Phillies are
yeah. Well,
because
I hope, that
they
would be nice.
picked up like 8 players over a couple of deals.
Okay. I would
And when you think of the players they got when, okay, my mind is failing me again. Who was the shortstop that went to L.A.? Jimmy
Rollins.
Jimmy Rollins.
Right.
They picked up players there.
Mm-hmm.
They got about a dozen new players to fill some needs, and they
that
could
helps.
put them in the minor leagues. I mean, this is very similar to what Theo was doing.
I think of the teams that are going to be helped though more immediately. I sort of like what Houston did. I mean, they added a little offense with Carlos Gomez.
Yeah.
They added, what would you call it, an extra arm with Mike Fires, and then didn't they get somebody else?
Yes.
Thinking who?
They got
I'm
a
trying
pitcher.
Yeah.
And I'm blanking again.
Oh, they got Casimir.
Yeah.
Who was
Who brilliant in his first time
Right.
time out.
So I think they made some intelligent moves there. The interesting thing, Jim, think of over coffee the last week or so. Everybody over at Mariano's is saying, oh man, the Brewers, because the Cubs were playing the Brewers over the weekend, so it was in the front of everybody's mind. Oh man, the Brewers are really terrible. But don't you think it's interesting that a team that standings-wise obviously is doing a bad job this year, but had Aramis Ramirez go to Pittsburgh, you had Gomez and Fires go to Houston, and you also had Gerardo Parra, I think, went to Baltimore. So even on a team that was, that's in last place and has been there all season, you had 4 players at least that somebody wanted. And I think the other name, because I watched a little bit of one of the Cubs-Brewers broadcasts, the other name that people had interest in was Lind, the first baseman.
First baseman, yeah.
And they didn't move him, but he
No.
could go.
He could go in a waiver
August
deal.
Waiver deal.
He
so,
could go in a waiver deal.
So here's a team that's really obviously
And-
not doing well, but they have 4 or 5 players that are very marketable.
Very marketable, and you think what they got back, and okay, let's fill some needs. Let's bring some people up. Let's have, hate to say it, but that's the term that's used. We'll have currency.
Sure. Yeah.
We'll have currency.
Yeah.
We'll have players that are available, and we'll have currency down the road.
Now, I was going to ask you, I know that you didn't get a real big chance to look at the paper, but I see you have By the Numbers article in front of you.
Yes, I want to talk about that.
But
We'll get to
the
that.
other article, I didn't read By the Numbers, but if you go to the USA Today section, there was an article about there was more ground balls, I think, percentage-wise in the majors than in quite a few years. And I read that article, and this was hilarious. One of the pitchers that was quoted in the article basically said something almost to the effect that, well, we're really smart now these days because we could see that that ground ball and getting that double play. Some of them go through, but most of them get caught. And I'm like, this is a big whether this is a new thing. I think pitchers have been knowing that since the day they started playing baseball.
That's right.
They
suddenly come to a realization, make them hit it on the ground. Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
Forget them fly balls.
Yeah, the ones that go out of the park.
Yeah.
Now, they're saying, though, Jim, that I think as of this year, that the strike zone has dipped down a little lower. And, and do you remember when we were kids, the strike zone basically was from, I want to say, the top of the knees to the letters.
To the letters, yeah.
And the strike zone over the years has gotten lower in the sense that the umpires usually, if everything you hear is to be believed, now is probably between the waist and the knees. I don't know about the top, but now you're saying it's lowered a little bit, maybe a couple inches below the knee. So it's
and sometimes it gets a little wide too.
It could, you know what I noticed? The guys who get the wider strike zone are the guys who are always around the strike zone. Greg Maddux used to get a wider strike zone.
Break, yeah.
I want to say that the pitcher from the 40s and 50s, Eddie Lopat, I remember reading. He said, he would intentionally. He'd start out. He'd hit the corner. And eventually he'd get because the umpire would get into a rhythm with the pitcher, and eventually he'd move a little further out, and he'd get that call. But I could see from the umpire's point of view. First off, I think the umpires are going to favor pitchers who have a good rhythm. They get the ball, they do their, they get into the stretch or the windup, and they deliver the ball. Those guys are going to, in my opinion, by and large, are going to get a lot better calls than the guys who fiddle around with the ball.
Yeah,
and you're aggravating the umpire by doing that.
Yeah, because the umpire wants to
move.
He wants to get done, and that's it.
Yeah,
So
a guy with some type of rhythm is going to get those kind of calls. So
yeah, ground ball rates are at their highest and have been since 2010. This year's 46.3% ground ball percentage is a record. And the 1.53 ground ball to fly ball ratio is the first time there have been 1.5 times as many balls on the ground as in the air.
Okay. Which is really pretty boring.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I like home runs. Let Javier Baez come up there and swing for the fences. I love watching that.
Chicks dig the long ball.
Yeah, they sure
remember
do.
That. If you remember that commercial, I'm trying to find the email that Stat Boys revelations.
Are you talking about the number of walks? Was it
walks?
Walks, where you're talking about walks taken.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. You came up with, or he came up with some interesting stats, and then went right back into his cave in the basement there?
He said, looking surprisingly tanned for someone who spends all his time in the basement. Statboy pointed out to me that during all this hoopla of the White Sox reaching 500, well, they didn't get there. They just gone back to being irrelevant again. They are on a pace for the fewest walks in a full season. Get out of here, 1981. Since 1903.
Okay.
The Phillies are on a similar pace, though their pace is for the lowest total since 1921. Kansas City, fewest in a 162-game season. Baltimore is on pace for their lowest walk total since 1909, which they actually managed to do last season. And Baltimore, being 1909, I mean, that predates when they were the Orioles. That goes back to the days of the St. Louis Browns. And he said, wonder why scoring is so low these days.
You're saying, okay, now, when we talked about this yesterday, this didn't hit me the same way. But he's saying scoring is less because guys are not taking as many walks?
He said they're not taking as many walks.
See, I sort of
You're not getting the runners on base. Of course, then again, if you've got 46.3% of the balls that are put in play are going on the ground,
Well, the other thing
You
that
should look at the double plays.
if I know you didn't have time to read the article, but the other thing is strikeouts are up a ton.
I'm saying, yeah, there's more strikeouts than hits.
I wish one of these days I'm going to remember to take this book out of the library and bring it for our broadcast. I go back to that book about the 45 Cubs, and at the end he statistically compares the 45 Cubs to the 2003 Cubs that were a game away from going to the World Series. And there's complete games. Obviously, the 45 Cubs a lot more. In terms of strikeouts, the 45 Cubs struck out way less than the 2003 Cubs. The 2003 Cubs way out homered the 45 Cubs, but in terms of doubles and triples, I believe the 45 Cubs were either better or
Probably
equal
far
or better.
Probably far better.
And just an interesting, and the number of strikeouts by the hitters was a ton less. So some interesting statistical things. Last night I had a relatively sleepless night.
Well, if you were listening to Grobstein,
And I was listening to Grobstein, and the interesting thing that they were talking about was, somebody was complaining. I guess David Robertson blew the save last night, and I don't know what the situation was, but I know I had heard a little bit of the game. Quintana was in about the fifth inning, going on 100 pitches, so you knew he wasn't going to go past the sixth. But I don't know what the pitcher prior to Robertson was doing, but I'm going to go back. Okay, Robertson obviously didn't make the save, but I'm going to go back to the idea of, was the guy prior to him retiring hitters, was he pitching well? Why do we automatically go to that guy, that ninth inning guy, if the eighth inning guy is sort of effective? And just go back to that whole idea of the way these managers use their pitchers.
Well, I don't know if. All right, let's see. Quintana, not bad for 6 innings. Petricka came out, pitched an inning, gave up a run on 2 hits, struck out 1, walked 2. Duke pitched the 8th, gave up a run and a hit, but he only threw 12 pitches.
Mm-hmm.
Robertson came in and blew the game.
Okay. Were they ahead or were they tied? Because then it wouldn't actually be a blown save technically, but that doesn't really make much difference.
Were tied.
They were tied.
They were tied.
So he took the loss.
He took the loss. Yeah.
I just think it's okay. Now here's another thing you could throw into the mix. Why are you using the closer when the game is tied? If he's the closer, that's not closing the game out. So you effectively, if the game would have stayed tied, you lose your closer. So now if you go ahead, who closes?
Who closes?
I mean, and again, I'm actually arguing against myself because I don't think it makes that much difference. You're a major league pitcher, you should be able to get 3 outs.
Yeah.
No question about that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But again, you don't always have everything going. You don't always get those 3 outs either.
Yeah.
So
we had a day last week. First we hear about I think it was all in one day. Billy Pierce passing away.
Mm-hmm.
Roddy Piper.
Yes.
And then Lynn Anderson.
Boy, did you read her obit, by the way, Jim? Man, I tell you, at the end, she was a little freaky.
Yeah.
She was doing some weird stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I saw her, Dana and I saw her 2 years ago when we were at Nashville and we went to the Ryman.
Okay.
Because they have like the oldies at the Ryman where they have some other stars, not the new, but to go back to the original home of the Grand Ole Opry, and she was one of the performers that night.
By the way, would you like to sing a few bars of her biggest hits so that everybody knows who we're talking about here?
I beg your pardon. I never promised you a rose garden. Okay, that took care of that. It was actually kind of funny. Somebody posted on Facebook, Lynn Anderson passed away today at age 67. Dare you to not sing her song now.
Good song.
Yeah.
I like the song.
Yeah.
Well, always one of my Not one of my absolute favorites, but one
Yeah.
I liked.
I think.
Billy
Yeah.
Pierce, you wanted to talk about? 'Cause
Yeah,
we're
I'm
looking at,
also
by
I'm
the
also
numbers,
looking.
and
We're
we're
getting
ready for a break.
Well, we'll just vamp here for a few minutes. Go, John. John is giving us his usual signals. Do what
Yes,
you
go
want. I
ahead.
don't know. Anything? We did not say good morning to the doctor of the dials.
Really?
You know, and I'm sorry about that. John, is what's new with you? This is a good way to kill a minute or two, so we get to the bottom of the hour and take a break.
Nothing too much, Jim and Rich. Everything is just going very nice. I had a very, very nice weekend up in Wisconsin this past weekend, and I was able to be with my daughter and my son-in-law and my 3 grandsons. So we had a very nice weekend. And although I got up there at midnight Saturday because I had to work Friday and Saturday in Oak Brook Terrace, but we had a very nice. Everything's going fine.
Very
I couldn't ask for anything better.
Jim, you know what I wanted to mention on the air? We mentioned what a beautiful and really just a fantastic wedding and reception that you had when you got married on the
And
20th of June.
By the way, my best man is 60 years old today. Gib Moore. Happy birthday to
Happy
Gib
birthday
Moore.
to
Happy
Gib.
birthday to him.
But John is sitting in front of us, and I'm looking at John. He's wearing shorts and a pullover shirt, and but I mentioned to him before you got here, and I sincerely mean this. If you would have seen John, I mean, you see, normally we see John in working attire, but if you would have seen John on the day of Jim's wedding, came to the reception. This, you know what? Neat as a pin. I'm telling you.
He dressed up- he cleaned
pressed
up well.
and everything. I mean, he
You cleaned up well there.
He really
Davida.
looked sharp, and I just wanted to mention that because we usually don't. Not to say that he's not neat, because he is, but we don't see him dressed up all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, you cleaned up. You cleaned up well. Let's take a break.
Now he's imitating Elvis. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's take a break.
You're listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVito Broadcast Center on Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Wednesday, August the 5th with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. And this is Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM in Norwich, Illinois. And now, back to Jim Leon and Rich Massaro.
All right.
Jim,
Thank you there,
before
Doctor
you
of the
get
Dials.
into Billy Pierce, I did want to mention that our good friend Stephanie Rybant over at
Fanny Schmoes.
They're going to expand. I think you
Yeah.
knew that. And they're looking at, actually, they looked at one location in Edison Park, right on Northwest Highway, in that little strip there where, that hot spot strip, and that didn't pan out, or it wasn't one that was feasible.
Mm-hmm.
And now looking at a couple locations, one around Irving and Pulaski, and the other around she just told me this morning, Montrose and Milwaukee. So, but the business is doing really well.
It's always nice to go in there.
Very,
always love going.
always good.
Always
good food.
Always love going there and be
Good drinks.
abused by the owners.
Yes, be abused by the owners. Of just So, I wanted to mention that. So
Good.
But you were. I'm sorry
Good.
to interrupt what
No.
you were going to say.
A lot of people, and actually, it was kind of surprising. A friend, when Billy Pierce passed away last week at the age of 88. I mean, your reaction was, I didn't know he was still alive.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that.
You
for
know,
sure.
but and a friend of mine, who's just an absolute diehard Cub fan, said, "How could he have ever been ignored by the Hall of Fame?" And I said, "Well, I just put the comment back to him on Facebook. Well, I said, I think he's a member of the Hall of the Very Good. He's not a member of the Hall of Fame, but it was kind of interesting to hear." Just looking at this article from John Grachowski in the Sun-Times, who does a lot of things on baseball by the numbers and other things. Billy Pierce, during his career, He was 186 and 152 with the White Sox from 1949 to 61, and he was 25 and 17 for his time prior to the White Sox with the Tigers, and then after the White Sox with the Giants, and his career ended in 1964. In the 5 years of consideration before he fell off the Baseball Writers Association ballot, his highest vote total was 7 votes.
Does he give some kind of reason why he would only get 7 votes?
Well, we'll start looking at the numbers here, and in the Golden Era Committee, he's always he was listed in the 2015 as receiving 3 or fewer votes in that group. He doesn't have the numbers among Hall of Fame electorate, but where does his performance rank among the Hall of Famers by the numbers? Let's start with victories, where Pierce's 211 are tied for 93rd in history among the 1,200 pitchers listed at thebaseballreference.com. Among Hall of Famers, though, Pierce falls well below the midpoint.
What does that mean?
Okay. There's 63 Hall of Famers who were starters in at least 60% of their appearances and pitched at least 1,500 innings, to take relievers and those who made the Hall of Fame primarily as position players out of the equation. Pierce's 211 victories would rank 50th in that group.
But he does rank.
Yeah.
Even among starting pitchers,
right.
He ranks.
But it's interesting, John Smoltz has 213 victories. Of course, John Smoltz was a reliever, too.
He was.
So, and Smoltz just went into the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
He ranks behind John Smoltz, 213, and Chief Bender, 212, and just ahead of Jesse Haynes, 210, and Don Drysdale, 209. But victories are influenced greatly by team defense and run support. To focus on earned run average instead, Pierce's 3.27 equals that of Jim Bunning, who is 48th in the Hall group. And it's just behind Catfish Hunter and Don Sutton, both at 3.26, and just ahead of Randy Johnson, 3.29, and Bert Blyleven, 3.31. But ERA has outside influences, too, and it's not a straight-up comparison to match Billy Pierce against Ed Walsh, 1.82, a pitcher from the dead ball era, or Bob Gibson at 2.91, who pitched in an era of expanded strike zones. And they start getting the ERA plus, which is normalizing, which is adjusted for the park and normalizing, so 100 equals the league average. Pierce's 119 ERA plus is closer to the midpoint among Hall of Fame starters, tied for 34th with Warren Spahn, Bob Lemon, Red Faber, John Ward, and old Hoss Radburn.
Oh, thanks, John.
But it's also, it's also interesting if you get into the trusty wins above replacement.
Sure. Explain that one for us.
I'm still trying to figure it out. Pierce at 53.1 is just behind Sandy Koufax, who is 50th in the Hall of Fame group.
Okay.
At 53.2, and it's just ahead of Early Wynn at 51.6. Thank you, John. The bottom line is, while Pierce was a better pitcher than some Hall of Famers, he was below the midpoint for the group, and his numbers fall short of demanding induction. Still, he was an outstanding pitcher who deserves the Hall comparisons, and older Sox fans should have very warm memories of his time on the South Side. Again, we need to start our own Hall of the Very Good.
But I don't think Gruchowski's argument is very persuasive.
I don't think his argument is very persuasive either. He deserves consideration.
A lot of consideration. He's right in there. I mean,
He's
the
in
names
the
that you
middle.
mentioned and the different categories that you spoke of are outstanding, no doubt about it, Hall of Famers. And how is Pierce not? You know what? The interesting thing, I think he mentioned in Wynn's in the article that team defense and I forgot what else he said. Were, obviously that's influential in your number of wins and your ERA. But I would really be interested to see, especially the. Let's just put it this way, and this will show that I'm not a. I never was a big Sox fan, so I don't know as much about their history as I do the Cubs. But let's just say from the time he got to the Sox, which probably would have been about the late 40s
49
to the mid 50s, I'm not sure how good the Sox were. And so if he was now, I know there was 2 years in a row where he was a 20-game winner, and right around the mid 50s. But I'm thinking, okay, you're talking about a guy who got 211 wins, and even if the Sox were a good team, they were never in that era what was known as a really good hitting team.
No.
Now they may have been really good defensively, which obviously is going to help any of the pitchers that they were, playing behind. But in the overall, I would say Billy Pierce probably didn't play or pitch for really what I would consider super strong teams. So the way I look at things, 211 victories is an outstanding mark for the teams he played for.
During that period that he was here, from 49 to 61, 49, the White Sox were horrible. 50, the White Sox were horrible. 51, I think, is when Paul Richards came, and Frank Lane became the general manager.
Mm-hmm.
And Frank Lane, it was
Trader
Lane,
which doesn't.
And then suddenly the White Sox became relevant.
Mm-hmm.
But there was the problem with that. You had that other team in New York.
Right, that's right. You always competed against them.
You always competed against the Yankees, and in those days of an 8-team league, the Sox were usually second or third.
Right.
Except for that 1 year in 1959.
Yes. So I just, and maybe I'm just being sentimental, but I'd say, I wasn't like a super Billy Pierce fan. I wasn't against Billy Pierce. I mean, I knew he was a good pitcher. I didn't think much about him because let's see, we would have been like 8 in 1959, and when he retired, we would have been 13. Yeah. So, you have, who knows the way you think back then.
He was just he had the reputation of being not only a good ball player, but a good guy.
Well, I think one of the problems, Jim, that he faces is the problem that, say, we talked a little bit earlier in the show about Eddie Lopat.
Right.
Other than maybe a guy like Greg Maddux, if you're not a hard thrower, which Billy Pierce wasn't, he was a pitcher, not noted for like a super fastball or anything. But unless you're a power pitcher, I think you automatically go to second grade status among the voters. For why I don't know. But, I mean, unless you're Maddux, who's not a hard thrower and wins 350 games, which you can't ignore, if you're not a hard thrower, you're out of luck.
Right.
Or what's perceived to be a hard thrower.
Right. And it was all, it was interesting, too. Maddux had talked about the point when they start talking this term now, the effective velocity of a pitcher, which is essentially your pitch sequence and how you set somebody up.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that Maddux always said his best sequence was a changeup on one corner, a changeup on the other corner. He said, and then a fastball high and inside. He said because by then, he said you've got a guy who's set up after he's seen 2 changeups coming at him, expecting something slow.
Right.
He said, and all of a sudden he's got a fastball coming at him. He said, which essentially wasn't terribly fast. He said about 92 miles an hour at that point in time. And he's got to adjust his swing, and he's coming inside. So what are you going to do? You're probably just going to hit it off the fists.
Yeah, I mean, if you could even get around on it,
if you can even get around,
if you can hit it.
If you can get around on it, and after looking at those after looking at 2 changeups, a fastball coming at you at 92 looks a lot faster than what it really is.
Oh, definitely.
So you're talking about the effective velocity of it.
I'd say this too. I mean, talking to basically on what you're saying is that any pitcher who can get a batter to bite on a high and tight pitch is going to have the advantage because not that many hitters, I don't care who you name, are going to be strong on that pitch.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but in addition, as you say, the way he set them up is really problematic. And you're making a good point. He's making a good point. The guy sees 2 pitches that are like, oh boy, now you're salivating. Now he throws something like, okay, this is right at your, in your eyeballs, and okay, I'm taking a whack at this, and guess what? I'm not hitting it.
Yeah.
So it's but I know we digressed from, but that is part of the conversation of a pitcher, say like a Pierce or a Maddox or a Lopat, who don't have an overwhelming fastball, but obviously very effective pitchers, and they know how to pitch. They set guys up, and they really are probably finer, if you want to just say pitching in a purest form, probably better pitchers than guys with a lot more velocity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, today, how many guys do you see with velocity? Now, let me ask you this. Is one of the reasons, and I'm throwing this out there hypothetically, is one of the reasons that you see such a reliance on the bullpen today the fact that the pitchers, whether they be starters or relievers, are more in the category of throwers, guys with good stuff, I'm not going to say they don't have good stuff, than they are pitchers.
Oh, yeah.
Because now, you know what, maybe this guy that you run in there in the sixth inning or seventh inning, if they see him more than, if they see him a second inning, they're going to tag him, because even though he's got good stuff, he's not a good pitcher.
Right. No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's come to the point when you think about the game when we were kids, you had your starting pitcher who'd try to save himself so he'd have something for the 7th, 8th, and 9th
Exactly.
inning. Now they tell you just go out, pitch your arm off for 6 innings, and we'll take it from there.
I tell you, one of the trades that was talked about at the deadline that I was sort of jazzed about and didn't happen. I don't know if it was just hot air, but the Cubs were rumored. It was rumored that the Braves liked Jorge Soler, and that they might be willing to trade Julio Teheran back this way. And when you talk about what you just mentioned, the pitchers would, fight to stay in the game and save themselves so they'd have something in those last 3 innings. A couple years ago, I'm watching a Cubs-Braves game early in the season, and I had never seen Teheran pitch. And he had pitched into the 9th inning, and it was a situation where somebody, now they had the lead, the Braves did, but it was a 1 or 2 run lead. And basically he did what you saw pitchers do quite a bit back in those days that we're talking about. He pitched around the batter, so he walked the batter, okay, to get to the next hitter. Now, it wasn't an intentional walk, but you could tell. I mean, this guy's control was there.
He was trying to finesse it.
He's finessing it, and so now the pitching coach comes out, and you could see Teheran, the way he's standing there, is ticked off. Hey, you know what? I did this for a reason, buddy, and I'm going to go after him, and my stuff's still there. Now, the rumor was on this trade that he isn't getting along with his pitching coach. And you know what? If that's true, if that scenario is true, based on what I saw and based on what they're saying, I'm all for Teheran. Because, you know what? Hey, I want to finish what I started, and I know if I have my stuff or not. And obviously, for a guy who at that point was probably 22 or 23, pretty smart pitcher, because he's going to pitch around the guy that he figures is dangerous and go to the next guy who he figures he can get. And I'm like, it's just like there's so much money in the game today, Jim. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to
say. But you know what? I don't care what sport you name, the coaches are treating the players like they're little automatons.
Yeah, I was going to. The point I was going to make was it's getting to the point where there is so much overthinking.
Exactly.
In the game.
Exactly.
That it's become to the point. It's almost to the point where the game that we loved growing up is getting to the point where it's coming very close to being unwatchable.
It is.
Yeah. Unless you got 3.5 to 4 hours to kill.
That's what, if put it this way, if it was really super enjoyable, I don't care. I mean, to me, I'm not one of these people who says speed the game up. Baseball is meant to be played at what I would consider, I'm not saying a slow pace, a leisurely pace, which is, in my mind, different. And you're supposed to sit there and enjoy it. and not sit and say, okay, let's rush through this so that, I just spent my $100 to get in the ballpark, but I got to get out of here in 2 hours. No, sit there and enjoy it for 3 hours. But it's not enjoyable in the sense that I don't think, the stats that you read off when in the article about ground balls, when you're seeing, what did you say, 1.5 ground balls to every fly ball. Obviously, that's not going to be as exciting a game as you want to see.
Now, I can tell you honestly, if you, as a fan of watching a game, if you see a 1-0 pitcher's duel, that can be a pretty damn exciting ball game.
Oh, sure.
If you got two pitchers, that game a few weeks ago when it was Burley versus Sale.
Yeah, good game.
Good
game.
And it didn't even take 2 hours.
No, that's a different story.
That would have been a game I would have sat there and watched and enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jim, because it'd be like saying if you see two boxers that are you've never heard of, but they give you a good scrap, or you see two teams, football teams with terrible records, but they play an exciting game. Who cares what their records are, or that they're nondescript guys in the ring, and that's all as a fan you're looking for. It doesn't matter what the team's record is. If the two teams are last place teams playing each other, you're looking to see a ball game you enjoy.
You're looking for something. You're looking for enjoyment because that's what you go out there for.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we follow sports? Because we enjoy it. We enjoy the sense of the competition, and to watch it and to see a quality game in front of you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Would I wonder if some of the old time players, obviously Babe Ruth was a carouser. Would Babe Ruth be? How would he be looked at in today's game?
He wouldn't even be on a roster.
Yeah, he probably.
He wouldn't be on a roster.
So I don't know if I'd go that far, but I'm thinking,
he's fat. He drinks too much.
That's right. And you know what? He's got a little problem with left-handers, so he's a platoon guy now. We're only going to hit him against righties.
That's right.
How about when what really?
I always think of John Kruk walking out of the dugout for batting practice. Big fat John Kruk with a cigarette in his mouth, and some woman sitting behind there he said, "You call yourself an athlete?" And turned around and looked at her, and he said, "I ain't no athlete, lady. I'm a baseball player."
Yeah, there you go. Oh, man. But I think they've, the powers that be have taken a lot of fun out of these games. It is. It's
to the point.
Yeah.
It's to the point where football is so overregulated.
Yeah.
And, when we hear about the injuries and the people that have played the game years ago who were, Mike Pyle passing away last week.
Right.
He's suffered with dementia for a number of years. It can be a danger. Obviously they're trying to do something to protect the players, but it kind of takes the sport out. I just wanted to say, just speaking about football, going off on something. I mentioned to you last week. I went to the National Sports Collectors Convention over at Rosemont. I hadn't been to one of those in years, and I got a ton of stuff that I wanted to
see what it was.
See if there's any
value.
And I'm convinced most of the stuff I have in my basement is worthless.
Okay.
But there might be a few things in there I can get it. But Chet Kopic was there, and Chet just finished a book that he was selling about Doug Buffone.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked it up, talked with Chet for a couple of minutes, and because we have a mutual friend, Arthur Brooks.
Oh, okay.
Arthur worked at Channel 5 years ago.
Okay.
So, chatted for a couple of minutes with that, and Chet's also been having some health issues that he's kind of posting just wanted to chat and see how he's doing. But the book itself, I took it home. I'm about 3/4 of the way through it. It's absolutely great.
Mm-hmm.
It's a conversation between the two of them.
That sounds like fun.
It is fun. It is absolutely a fun read because you have the conversation between the two of them, and it's one of those things, as you're reading it, you can almost hear each other. You can almost hear their voices as you're doing it. And, I mean, great stories. Buffon talking about his life. I said there was some great... There were a couple of good Doug Atkins stories in there.
Sure, Doug. Yeah.
Doug Atkins played for the Bears in the 50s and 60s. Was an absolute crazy individual.
A giant.
6 foot in that day. He was 6 foot. 6'8", about 295.
Yeah.
But the funniest story was he said, and I think it was Buffon's second year. They're out playing the Rams. And he's up at 6:30 on Sunday morning, and he's down in the restaurant in the hotel having coffee. And he said he's sitting at a table where he can look out at the lobby, and he sees this figure running from pillar to pillar, hiding and peeking around. He said it suddenly dawned on him. He said it was the old man. It was Hallis. He was looking for players who broke curfew. So it's about 7:30 in the morning, and Doug comes strolling in. Hallis jumps out from behind the post and screams at him. He said, "I finally caught you." He says, "It's a $7,500 fine." And Atkins looked at him and said, "You don't even pay me $7,500.
Hey, speaking, we were just on Billy Pierce, and you bring up Doug Buffon. There's a good now. Here's where
there's a guy who belongs in a Hall of Fame.
Okay, so let's say it this way though. I'm not trying to compare Billy Pierce's career to Doug Buffon, but if Doug Buffon is a Hall of Famer, and you know what, a lot of this stuff. See, I think a lot of what makes a guy a Hall of Famer, in addition to his stats, is the only word I could think of that might fit is anecdotal history. I know that I think we mentioned this before on the show. A lot of the old Bears think that Willie Gallimore should be in the Hall of Fame. If you look at Willie Gallimore's statistics, I don't know if Willie Gallimore even gained 2,000 yards in his career. I don't know.
I know. I think I think he did that. I don't think he made 3,000 yards.
Okay, so he may not have made three. But here's the point, and I think the point they're trying to make is when you put the ball in Willie Gallimore's hands, you knew as his teammate and the other team knew as his opponent how dangerous he was. And I think you could say the same for guys like Doug Buffon or Billy Pierce. I think the guys who were on the field with them, both as teammates and opponents, would be able to give you their value much better than a guy who writes sports.
Then writes and has to elect that. This Doug was a good ball player. Doug was a great ball player on really bad teams.
Yeah, he was.
Really, really bad teams. Willie Gallimore. Let's check it out again here.
Yeah, Willie Gallimore, Florida A&M.
Florida A&M, rushed in his career, played 82 games, rushed in his career 670 times for 2,985 yards.
Okay, so there you go.
Caught 87 passes for 1,201 yards.
Okay. But I guess maybe baseball and baseball, hockey. Think about this, Jim. Baseball, hockey, and basketball are all statistical games no matter what position you play. Football, in certain positions, every position is not a statistical position. And Doug Buffon was in a position, of course, where statistics are counted. Tackles and interceptions would be the main one for a linebacker. And I believe that he may be the all-time leading Bears interceptor as a linebacker. If
He is.
not, he might
He
be
is.
second to
He
Buckets
is.
or somebody.
No,
like
he
that.
is.
But, so
He is.
And
like
I think
24, 25 interceptions, I think.
I think the point that you make too is a really good one, because I want to say he came shortly after the '63 championship season, and then I want to say that he retired like
79.
79.
He played 14 years.
So I think in that time they might have had one playoff team, two. And but you're right. I mean, how does a player, especially in a sport where linebacker has stats, but I don't know how heavily they weigh in his election.
And a lot of things weren't kept then that they keep now.
Right. But I mean, how do you actually? Now, here's a very valuable player on a very bad team, and it's I think something that's very hard to judge is if Doug. Now you talk about your WAR, which is obviously you're weighing one player's value versus another.
Right.
Now that I think would be a fairly valid statistic in the case of a guy like a Doug Buffon or anybody else who played on bad teams. How much worse would that team have been
without
a guy like Buffon?
Right.
And so of course that's what makes sports great. We have we can have all of these discussions.
Yeah. I mean, the book itself is, I think the general release of the book is going to be sometime in September.
I'm looking forward to that.
But Chet was selling it, and I guess he and Doug's wife, Dana, are doing some appearances and some book signings around now selling it.
I have to say this. I think, at least from what you could get from his on-air persona, I don't think Doug Buffon was much concerned, at least publicly, with whether he was in the Hall of Fame or not.
No.
He loved football. That was obvious from his commentary. Whereas a guy like Ron Santo sort of pined for that
He did.
distinction.
He did.
Just an interesting thing.
It is, and it's an interesting point too, because there was one time I was at a Cub convention, and it was right after the Hall of Fame election, and this was at the Hilton, and I was down in Kitty O'Shea's. Gee, with a drink in my hand, what a surprise!
Yeah,
who'd have thunk it?
Yeah, who'd have thunk it is right.
Santo came in and was making the rounds and chatting with everyone and that, and walked by. I said, "Hey, Ron, how you doing?" And he shook my hand, and I said, "Boy," I said, "you got screwed again by the Hall of Fame." And he looked at me and he went, "I sure as hell did."
Yeah.
Where, on the other hand, you read the book, you're going to get the impression, reading about Doug, he loved the Bears, he loved playing football, he loved his family, and he loves the city of Chicago and Bear fans. And that's his joy.
I know we're right at the end, Jim, but this thought came to mind as you're talking about what came through with the book about Doug. But the thing I would like to say and clarify something here. Doug Buffon, Ron Santo, whatever player's name you want to put out there, these guys, now Santo, after the fact, after his playing career, is when he pined for the Hall of Fame. But I don't think there is a single player that's ever put on one of these professional uniforms who went out there expressly to say, I want to be in the Hall of Fame.
No.
They're all competitors, and they all want to do the best that they can do, and then those accolades afterwards are, the result of their work on the field.
Yeah, I mean, you go back, and I've got a couple of books that I'm reading right now. I mean, I've got Buffon's book, and I mentioned one a couple of weeks ago when I talked about that I'd found in a Goodwill store about the money of sports.
Right.
And that, and I also, George Will's book kind of has gone to the sidelines, but the
Men at Work,
but there was a spot in there about Earl Weaver talking about building a roster, and he said essentially he said not everybody can do everything well.
Right.
But
Oh, that's,
everybody on a roster can do something.
Yeah, exactly.
Not everybody's going to be a star.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, you get a great feel for a guy and the way he looks at himself and how he's had an opportunity to have a career and enjoy himself when you just look at Dan Horan. It just came to the Cubs.
Yeah.
He's 34 years old. He said this is probably the last team he's going to play for.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I don't have the skills and I don't have the speed that I used to. As a matter of fact, his Twitter feed is I only throw 88.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But he sounds like a fun guy.
Oh, sure. I mean,
and he's happy to be in a part of a team that maybe has a chance to be in the playoffs. They're tied for the last playoff spot right now.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, well, for two guys who had no idea what they were going to talk about today, we've gone through about an hour and 5 minutes. John's sitting in there laughing, going, yeah, you two clowns just never have an idea what you're going to do. And he says, somehow you always manage. Yeah,
We
all right.
do.
Somehow we always manage. All right, thanks again for listening to our little nonsense. John, thanks for putting up with our little nonsense. And
It's always a pleasure.
yeah, okay. Okay. If you believe that, that's fine. I think when you have your headset on, it's just so you don't hear us. You're listening to WFMT. Why don't you admit it?
No way. No way.
All right.
Oh, God.
Time for us to wrap it up and get on out of here. Thanks again for this. Thanks for listening. We will catch you again in a couple of weeks. We are Taillights.
You have been listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Wednesday, August the 5th, the year of our Lord, 2015, on Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network with the WRHS sports announcers Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. This broadcast was directed by John DeVita, and special thanks to radio station manager Kevin Zeflick of WRHS-FM Norwich, and the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, Mr. John Chikanda. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Tuesday, August the 4th, the year 2015. Until next time, please be safe. And thanks for listening. And this is Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich, Illinois. Have a good day, everyone.